Hello. Okay, we got this started without my intro music. And I was waiting for it to come on. I'm like, huh. But here we are. Why not? I'm just still gobsmacked about that proposal I just read. Wow. Well, hello, everyone. Let me see here. I wanted to make sure I hit the right thing because I'm going to see who's coming back. Let me just make sure it's live because I have a feeling I hit the wrong thing. So let me double check this. If anyone can let me know in comments if this is being played live right now. Yeah, it is. Okay, so I guess we're good. Okay, well, I'm just going to continue. We are continuing with the Liberty Solution. Down in the low bar is the my Amazon affiliate link for this book. I'm just looking at the speaker of the ducks there. And yeah, I got to get my thoughts together. Hello, JJ. After that completely abysmal bylaw amendment I just read, I thought we had tyrannitarians in Colorado. Oh, boy. Oof. Okay. Written by a friend. Amazon affiliate link down below. This book so far is going to be the book I recommend when people say, I have liberty curious friends, what book should I give them? So far, this one has been fantastic. And I doubt it's going to disappoint me in the rest of it because the first part's been so good. But we're going to do 2 chapters, I think. Yeah, we're going to do chapter 3. Taxation is not theft, it is extortion. I don't like quibbling over what taxation is. Taxation is theft. Yeah, JJ, wasn't that really bad? Oh my God. I'm in shock, and I don't get shocked easy. Particularly after what the LNC did to me. I thought I was beyond shock. Wow. Man. Theft is extortion. Oh, God, okay. And then chapter 4, crony capitalism. So we're going to do these 2. I might actually even have more shows tonight. Today was just a hectic day with Delaware. I'm supposed to be writing something. I'm not saying what because I'm not getting into that. JJ knows what I'm supposed to be writing. And I haven't worked on it all day. Actually, I wrote a paragraph. Okay. Taxation is not theft, it's extortion. All right, let's go. Taxation is a cancer of the modern era. It certainly is. The most disturbing symptom is that a majority of good and honest Americans have become complacent in, or even blind to the fact that the U.S. federal government extorts a sizable percentage of their earnings each and every year. They also put on a protection racket fee on every sale too. You know, they get between every consensual exchange of goods and money between merchants and consumers. They justified this blatant and ungodly amount of extortion by parroting the same talking points fed to them by elite politicians. Number 1, taxes. Repeat. Come on. Taxes are, okay, this is what politicians say. You all could fill this in for me. Taxes are the price we pay to live in a civilized society. Without taxes, who will build the roads? And we need taxes to pay for basic services like firefighters and police. Oh my God. Oh God, okay. The present state of affairs is sad and incredibly ironic when one realizes that the biggest issue sweeping the American colonies in the late 1760s and early 1770s was taxation on imported tea. While it is true that the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord due to the British Army mobilizing to seize or destroy the colonists' arms, All of the political turmoil that led up to that point stemmed from the colonists' grievances of having taxes levied on them by the crown without any representation in Parliament. Though I love a sign we have in Colorado that says, taxation with representation sucks too. Okay. What is really interesting is just how little of a tax the Tea Act implemented relative to today. The 92,000 pounds of tea, valued at 9,659 pounds, puts each pound of tea worth about 2 shillings, which is about 1/10 of a pound, before the tax. Under the old pound shilling pence system, there were 12 pence to a shilling and 240 pence to a pound. Adding 3 pence to 2 shillings, this is just getting way too complicated for me. Plus the amount, whatever. Let's just translate this. The Sons of Liberty rebelled against the king in an extraordinary and historic manner for increasing the price of tea from about 1776, funny, I wonder if he did that on purpose, to $19.99 per pound in today's currency. And funny, they talk here about the Revenue Act of 1864. I didn't highlight anything about the Revenue Act except for it expired. I'm like, we need more acts that expire. Sunset provisions on all laws. Then it goes on to talk about the income theft. Not only did the year 1913 see the legalization and institution of a tax directly on the fruits of one's labor, but also saw the creation of the most destructive entity ever conceived to oversee the value of every American's hard-earned dollar and subsequently destroy it, the Federal Reserve System. The Fed, however, is an abomination, best left to be expounded upon in its own chapter. Okay, let's do that. While income tax is the single biggest revenue generator for the federal government and is the one tax that most Americans seem to care about, the pure volume of taxes that are levied against all of us on a daily basis should, in and of itself, be cause for alarm for everyone. In fact, there are more than a handful of taxes that we never see, as they are all rolled into the price of the products we purchase. Other taxes are either called tariffs, fees, or licenses by the state, but they are no different than taxation from a legal standpoint. Here is a heavily abridged list of the taxes we pay other than the income tax. Though something in here I don't think is actually a tax. It's an involuntary fee, but a fee is not necessarily a tax. Some fees are taxes. Not all fees are taxes. I'll tell you which one here. We'll go back to it. We'll see if you get it out of this list. Property tax, sales tax, marriage license, gift tax, air transportation tax, inheritance tax, vehicle inspection fee, vehicle registration fee, garbage collection fee, firearm carry license, liquor tax, gasoline tax, driver's license, and pet license. It's the garbage collection fee. If they're actually collecting the garbage and that fee is to do that, A, it's involuntary because it's the municipalization of garbage collection, but at least I wouldn't consider that a pure tax. I would consider it a racket, but an enforced monopoly, but not a tax. Despite massive public opposition, the Republican-controlled House raised the debt ceiling by $900 billion to avoid default. The U.S. credit rating was downgraded from AAA to AA+ for the first time in history, and nothing actually changed from a fiscal standpoint. Again, in 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2017, the debt ceiling was raised and was ultimately suspended by President Trump on September 30th, 2017. And this suspension grants the U.S. Treasury the authority to borrow as much money as required to, quote unquote, fulfill its obligations. The only obligation the state has is, what is the only obligation that the state has? Just read my mind. Stop existing. Ka-chung. Okay. Now I'm all happy again thinking about that. Oh, and I didn't do any of my grifting. Super chats are always welcome, so I don't have to mangle my arm. Look what it did to me. Look what the vampires did to me. Okay. Those who hold the libertarian philosophy often get hammered. I'm sorry. The sentence went on, but I just like the period right there. We do often get hammered. I wish I was getting hammered right now. That sounded bad. I meant in a, never mind. I'm just going to quit while I'm ahead. When they say taxation is theft, largely due to the fact that most people have been conditioned to believe in the necessity of taxation from the state. After all, we have never known a society without copious amounts of taxation, and therefore it's difficult for people to grasp the idea behind such a notion. It's easy if you try. No state in the history of the world has ever existed without taxation, but does that mean it is not theft? Dictionaries always seem to put an out in their definitions. For example, the Oxford English Dictionary includes the phrase without legal right in their definition of steal. Since it is the state that defines what is legal right, it seems on its face that taxation would therefore not be theft. This, however, defines logical sense. And it goes on to say, how you come to own the fruits of your labor. It is an individual's labor that grants him the right to claim title of ownership over his property. It is an individual seeking to take possession of the laborer's currency without their consent. That constitutes theft in the state of society. With this essential truth highlighted, we can now go back to the definition of theft and ask the necessary question: what grants the state the legal right, under natural law, to obtain possession of an arbitrary percentage of the fruits of one's labor? Many would usually attempt to answer this with one of the talking points listed in the beginning of this chapter, but none of them answers the fundamental question. Others might suggest that the Thomas Hobbes view of a social contract, that essentially society has agreed to the taking of property to pay for the commonalities we enjoy, such as our roads and bridges. The fundamental problem with this philosophy is that unless 100% of the population agrees with the form and rate of taxation, then anyone who dissents will have their natural rights violated, including anyone born thereafter. Absolutely. Alrighty. Now, Locke was okay with taxation, by the way, so he talks about that. John Locke's position is that he who enjoys the protection the state has to offer, I don't enjoy it at all, shall pay his portion for such protection, is the one that best explains the state's authority to tax, but it is still not without flaw. As previously stated, unless 100% of the population agrees, then each person who dissents must be coerced into the payment of the taxes levied against him. Failure to do so will result in the state placing the tax evader in a jail cell as punishment, and then seizing the taxes owed, plus interest. Should he refuse to be taken to jail, state agents will be required to invoke violence against him, which will likely result in the tax evader's death, and in the eyes of the state, this is an appropriate use of force. This by definition means that taxation is not only theft, it is more specifically extortion. Then the title of this chapter should not be taxation is not theft. It should be it's not only theft. And then I wouldn't have gotten so triggered by this. Okay, now I've got a really long portion to read because I thought it was so good. So bear with me because I think this is the last part of chapter 3. But I highlighted this whole part because, again, I don't normally highlight whole big parts. I like to do little parts and then do my own original thoughts, but I thought this was good. So, settle in with me, class, for story time. If, for example, Bob extorts $100,000 from John with a threat of violence for noncompliance, Bob is still the rightful owner of that $100,000. When the possession of the $100,000 changes from John to Bob, John did not transfer the title of ownership to Bob, as this can only be achieved through voluntary exchange. Because of the coercion from Bob's threat of violence against him, even though John chose to give Bob the money rather than face the consequences of noncompliance, his choice was not a free one to make, since self-preservation is in our nature. Bob, now in the possession of $100,000 rightfully owned by John, then goes to the Mercedes-Benz dealership and exchanges it for a brand new fully loaded AMG C63 coupe with a 4-year service package. The dealership, believing Bob to be the rightful owner of the $100,000, has not committed any wrongdoing, and it is not their responsibility to ensure title ownership of the funds used. But Bob has now committed the second criminal act of fraud. By using money extorted from John and misrepresenting it as his property, Bob has defrauded the dealership out of one of their vehicles. Now, possessing the new Mercedes-Benz, Bob drives it back to John's house and eagerly hands him the keys and the title. There are two possibilities that could play out of this scenario. Whether or not John actually wants the car is entirely irrelevant. If John did want the car, then he would have made the purchase himself when he was ready to do so. If he did not want it, then what was given to him as a result of the extortion was something he would not have purchased himself, and he is now in possession of property he does not want. Either way, what Bob did violated John's property rights. By making the choice for John without his consent on how to best use his $100,000, Bob is guilty of theft. By using a threat of violence against him as a means of coercion, Bob is guilty of extortion. Finally, by transferring ownership of property that is not his to another party in exchange for goods, Bob is guilty of fraud. At no point in this scenario did Bob's actions magically transform him from being criminal to moral, from being legitimate under the laws of nature. Likewise, at no point does the state's extortion from the individual become moral, even if the state provides a good or service in return. It is and will always be extortion. As one final point, the logic surrounding the very premise of a social contract is non-existent. Contracts, by their very nature, require consent from all parties to be considered valid. Even in today's state of society, courts will reject upholding any private contract in which one party was coerced into agreement. The glaring exception to this, however, is if the state brings charges against an individual for non-payment of taxes. Despite no contract existing, be it physical or oral, the state jurist will always rule in favor of the state. The notion that one is subject to a contract by simple virtue of being born or residing in a geographic location is illogical. Certainly you would reject any demands to fulfill terms of a private contract which was agreed to by another individual, even if that individual was a family member or friend. Unless you voluntarily co-signed the contract, you would not be responsible for its fulfillment. To paint an extreme example of how a social contract works, imagine if Congress, duly elected by the people, passed an act requiring all adult citizens to have sex with either their congressperson or one of their senators. Even if such a repugnant provision were enshrined in the Constitution, you would find this unacceptable to say the absolute least. It would be rightfully proclaimed to be rape. Now let us assume that all people who identify with political party A agree with this new law, and only those who identify with political party B dissent. Does this change anything at all? Undoubtedly no. What if all 250 million American adults except for you agreed? The answer is still no. The state would have passed a law that would result in you being the victim of rape or subject to other violence for noncompliance. This holds true regardless of whether the entire population at large agreed to it. Under no circumstance should the notion of a social contract be considered valid, not for justifying taxation, nor for any other thing. A contract requires all parties involved to agree to its terms and conditions voluntarily and freely. Since no actual contract exists between the state and you as an individual, stipulating that you will pay X percentage of your wages, Y percentage of the value of the goods you purchase, or Z percentage of an arbitrary valuation assigned to your property, the state has no authority to demand from you, your children, or anyone past, future, present, or future generations. And all of God's people said, amen. Okay, next chapter. Crony capitalism. I didn't highlight very much here because I think we all, like, there wasn't anything here I think I needed to repeat. I mean, I highlighted some things, but not as much as the taxation one because I just love to rant about taxation. It says, many Americans believe the U.S. economy is capitalistic. I'd say most believe that. And to some extent it is. But over-regulation, barriers to entry, and countless federal and state laws prohibiting X, Y, and Z make the American economy a bastardized hybrid at best. True. The problem is not the fact that we have something that resembles a free market. It is that we actually do not have a free market. People who are flocking to the ideas of socialism do so because the effects of crony capitalism are actually represented in some of Marx's ideas, and when lies are rooted in bits of truth, they are easier to believe. true that as well. The thing about the free market is that it does not have a safety net, and the notion that a company is too big to fail does not exist. A truly free market dictates that a company must thrive on their own merit with an incentive to grow and be profitable. The basic rule is that failure to meet market demands will likely mean certain death for the company. If this was allowed to work in its pure form, meaning free from any and all state involvement, and the market, aka the people, would be the single mechanism by which companies succeed or fail. All right. Yay, laissez-faire. And he goes on to detailing out the very high cost of regulations, which is just, we all know, is ridiculous. It says, Americans have become so reliant on the state that it's hard for many of them to imagine any aspect of life completely free of its involvement, but I challenge everyone to try. Capitalism maximizes the amount of liberty that the individual has, and that is the one thing for which we should always strive. Before 2009, Uber did not exist, and there were no regulatory burdens for such a company. Weird ass fly. Shoo, fly. Within a few years, the company grew at an exponential rate and became a household name. It was at that point that the state began regulating the ride-sharing industry, and their growth began to decline. This is what happens when we let the free market be a free market. Let startups enter without state obstruction. Let mega corporations go bankrupt if they mismanage their finances. Let the little girl sell lemonade on her street corner, and let that taco truck continue to sell great tacos around town. Most importantly, we should let all of this happen freely. It does not take a professor of economics to see that businesses will thrive if we let them. Truly opening up the market will reduce costs, increase competition, and pave the way for exponentially more innovation than we see today. Yeah, see, I like it. Good book. Beginner stuff, right? But good. So I would highly suggest you get it and use here's my grifting, and use my Amazon affiliate link. So the next chapter is The Greatest Heist in Human History, Chapter 5, about the Federal Reserve System. And I like to look ahead to see how long it is. Yeah, we'll just do that chapter by itself. Because it is 20 pages, and I like these segments to be relatively short. This one was a bit longer than I like. Okay, everyone. We are done. I might have a few more tonight. I don't know. They probably won't be live. There was a few pre-recorded things I wanted to do. I actually had an entirely different thing planned for the night, but then Delaware happened. Couldn't prepare. So, that is it. I hope you guys have an awesome night, and if I don't see you again tonight, I'll see you tomorrow. Apparently Mike is coming over, and we're going to do a Robert's Rules megathon, and that will be fun. See you then. Bye-bye.
Given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.